Hello, everyone. We're going to do chapter 28, section 4 today. Really finish up chapter 28. Not sure if I'm going to give you a homework or not. I'll put that in the class notes in the classroom if there's going to be a homework. There might be a homework sheet, all right, but I'm not necessarily sure if I'll assign a homework. I'll let you know. What you will see is this sheet here, okay, which again is going to finish up the last section for us. I'm really just going to kind of go over the answers, all right, and uh, introduce a couple of things here, really on the third and fourth slide, okay, that are going to be a little bit important. So let me get to the presentation. Okay, we're really going to get introduced here to the concept of the importance of oil or petroleum in the region of the Middle East and the organization known as OPEC, or the Organization for Petroleum and Exporting Countries, which basically means the Middle Eastern countries, this region right here, okay, is going to play a very vital role for the United States and other nations because it produces a majority of the world's oil. All right, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Turkey. This region right here. All right, a lot of you might have heard of Iran. All right, we're going to talk a lot about Iraq and Kuwait here shortly. All right, you've heard a lot about Afghanistan and Pakistan, and rightfully so. Okay. This map here just kind of shows you the amount of oil produced, all right, per day in millions of barrels. All right. So it gives you an idea of the amount of oil produced in these regions and why some of these regions are incredibly wealthy and incredibly lucrative. Okay. Um, One of the things we will talk about is as these relationships with these countries, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, the Middle East, become a little bit more controversial and a little bit more a harder relationship to get between us and them in the Middle East. You're going to have a lot of presidents try to work on peace deals and agreements. And one of the most famous was by President Carter, known as the Camp David Accords, where he actually gets Israel, all right, to sign peace agreements with some other nations, trying to stabilize the region. Again, a stabilized region in the Middle East is good for everybody, especially when we talk about the idea of oil. All right, but by the early mid 1990s, we also get the idea of number 14, what's known as Westernization. All right, where the adoption of ideas, cultures, technology from the Western region, especially the United States, all right, are tried to be dropped on some of these cultures in the Middle East, and a lot of the cultures in the Middle East don't want it. Okay, and what's going to happen is what's known as Islamic extremists. Okay, this is going to be the first time we mention this. All right, who do not like Western ideas. They see Western ideas or American ideas or democratic ideas as a threat to their own beliefs. All right. And some of them are actually going to turn to violence against the United States and other Westerners. And we'll talk more, obviously, about that when we get into the last two units. But we'll go back here a little bit. One of the people we'll talk about in that region is going to be Saddam Hussein. He is the dictator of Iraq. What he is going to do is invade Kuwait, which is one of the richest oil producing nations in the world. President Bush could not allow this. President Bush was an ally of Kuwait. He's an ally of Saudi Arabia. He'll impose sanctions on Iraq and tell Saddam Hussein to stop. He builds up a coalition of forces. He goes to the United Nations. And he basically tells Saddam Hussein, if you are not out of Kuwait by a certain amount of time, we will invade. And he does. Okay, 30 nations led by the United States will demand Saddam Hussein withdraw from Kuwait. It's under the command of General Norman Schwarzkopf and General Colin Powell. 6 weeks later, Hussein will withdraw troops from Kuwait. The UN will impose sanctions. However, Saddam Hussein will keep power and is suspected of building nuclear weapons and biological weapons. We will talk more about this in the section 4. All right. Here is President Carter signing the Paris Peace Accords, the Camp David Accords, all right, between Egypt and Israel. Here is President Clinton trying to work out peace deals, all right, in the Middle East. However, you also get the introduction of this, all right, Middle Eastern Islamic extremist groups who begin to hate the United States, all right, based on the fact that they don't like Westernization, they want to keep their culture, and they see the United States as the enemy. All right, here is Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, all right, who is going to be an enemy of the United States. Iraq will invade Kuwait. The United States will defend Kuwait. The Iraqi war will take place, okay? And before Saddam Hussein leaves Kuwait back to Iraq, he sets the Kuwaiti oil fields on fire. Famous photo from the Kuwaiti war. Two individuals to talk about: Norman Schwarzkopf, General Norman Schwarzkopf. You'll see 4 stars, all right, and General Colin Powell, all right. General Schwarzkopf will be the commander of all forces in Desert Storm, as they call this, the war against Iraq, known as Operation Desert Storm. And General Colin Powell actually is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, okay, which means he is the military advisor to President Bush during this. He will also go on to serve as Secretary of State under President Bush later on. All right, here are the individuals involved in the war. All right, Richard Cheney, Dick Cheney, I believe the National Security Advisor, Vice President Dan Quayle, General Powell, General Schwarzkopf, and President Bush. And here's a famous photo, and I like showing this photo. All right, when the war was over and all these troops returned home, President Bush threw a parade for them. They won. They defeated Saddam Hussein. They liberated Kuwait, and he brought the troops home. And here's General Schwarzkopf right here, a 4-star military general with his staff behind him. President of the United States, President Bush, comes out to meet him in a suit. The general salutes the president. It's a very, very important photo. No matter who the president is, the military answers to the president. He or she is the commander in chief of the United States military. Whether they're a military vet, whether they've served in combat, whether they fired a gun, it doesn't matter. The democratically elected president of the United States is the commander in chief of the United States military. That's in the Constitution. All right, so a couple of things here. Again, I just wanted to go over the war in Iraq. All right, the first one we'll talk more about, the second one later. All right, I wanted to talk to you about the attempt to try and settle peace in the Middle East, which doesn't really happen, the introduction to Islamic extremism, and the idea that people in the Middle Eastern region weren't necessarily open to the United States getting involved, which kind of lays the groundwork for later on. All right? So, again, if I post homework, do it. If I don't, read the notes, watch the videos. And if you have any questions, get back to me.